Well, you know, I could for hours on end. I mean, obviously the garbage code in the new hope is 326.3.7, but you know, I won't go there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to sort of demonstrate some of the screen reader features. I didn't put this in the talk because obviously it's audio, so it's kind of hard to describe. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on NVDA and I'm going to pull up Quorum Studio so you can kind of see how it's all put together. Because I don't know if I have how do I have audio and
Haha, it's here. It's not my job.
So what you'd have to do is go to the website. Quorum.
It does not, and we ran out of time to toss it on there. But one of us can make it.
No, there are several.
Yes. If you need it for your Mac and you don't mind the fact that it's not screen readable on Mac, but you want to use it there anyway, we can make you a copy of the Mac. We just did for the pen drive.
So you
Forgot, to be honest.
didn't work, or they didn't put it on the
Yeah, and guys, the download for Windows is on your flash drive, which might be faster than trying to, if you're on the Quorum website, trying to get soybeans, just use the flash drive. Okay, you have a Mac, that's why you don't have Quorum Studio, that's what Andy just said. So they have to make a Mac Quorum Studio appear, and then you'll run around with the flash drive and give it to you. I am not in charge of that drive. That is above my pay grade.
There we go. I mean, it's
So if you hit that, typically it would,
yeah, so it usually would.
I can see HDMI and
This is fine. Okay.
Wi-Fi is the summer network. Password is summer 2019. Capital S.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and load up Quorum Studio, and on my machine, since I installed the installer, I go up and I just click on Quorum Studio, or I can navigate there with the keyboard, just in a normal Windows way. User account. Weirdly, the installer forces you to have admin access right now. We will remove that because that's obviously important. But it's a beta, it's a quirk. When it boots up, there's a pause. And the reason that it has to pause like that is because we've been adding, in order to make everything sort of like nice and speedy and efficient, we do a lot of caching of memory for the programming language, basically. So when it's loading, what it's really doing is it's getting Quorum ready to be used by the system, right? And that actually reduces the memory footprint, which is good because a lot of you're already using the graphics card and stuff like that pretty heavily for a tool like this. So it's a thing that has to be managed. When you pull it up, you'll notice that there are quite a few buttons and symbols and stuff like that. And so if I press, I can press things like F6 and I can navigate around with my screen reader off that, where I can click on the buttons, and I can press Tab. And I can go to various items on there. Now, some kinds of toolkits or windowing toolkits, you have additional hotkeys, like some toolbars you can press right, left on, and some you can press Tab or Shift Tab on. For whatever reason, we forgot to add the right and left for the toolbar, but these are minor little quirks that are in the beta that will be tweaked as we go for the second one. But for now, you can do a lot of F6ing to jump between panes, and you can press Tab and Shift Tab to move around between a lot of components. Does that make sense? Okay, so in order to actually do stuff in the environment, one thing I do is I might go to the I'm gonna go to the new project button, and I can pull into this thing. Now you'll notice that in Quorum Studio, one thing that is a little bit quirky is that we had to build all of the UI toolkit from scratch. Now keep in mind, when Oracle built, that means they had a team of 80 for 10 years. We had 2 people for 5. So like, it will take a little bit of time to make the UI a little bit less quirky because there's just a lot of features. So sometimes you have to kind of drag the window a little bit for visual stuff, and we're kind of working on those little quirky things. But nonetheless, it will still work. And I can go to either the Advanced tab, and I see a whole bunch of different items. There's a document, an image sheets, an internet application, you can write network games. There's a Lego particular thing. There's a Skybox sine wave applications, 2D and 3D physics, a user interface template, and then a web server that you probably won't use, but it's all in there. We hope so too, and I'm glad that that's your first reaction.
Oh my gosh, so they're gonna be able to use cash on it.
They can just,
Or hit,
press tab, whatever they want, or they can click on it, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and that way they can kind of generate stuff. Okay, is everybody with me so far? I don't know, how many people, show of hands, have up the new project dialog right now? Okay, just a couple, okay. Yeah, welcome to the beta, right? There are some quirks with the graphics and the screen reader as well. So I will point them out as I
If your screen opened up in kind of a half screen, if you shut it down and reopen it, it should come up and look like Andy's screen.
Yeah, it's a little quirky, like I said. Okay, so just because I want to make something simple, I'm going to click blank. I won't use the keyboard for absolutely everything, even though you can. I'm just trying to go fast so that you can see what is done. Now, there's one other quirk I have to tell you right away because it's related to the way we're connecting into the operating system. And that is, I know it's sucky, but it is true. This little browse button, this little browse button on the side that pulls up the folder in the new project dialog specifically does not work. And it does not work because of reasons we haven't figured out yet, otherwise we would have just fixed it. So you have to type in the path where you want your project manually. I know that's annoying. It is annoying, it will be fixed. It annoys me personally as I'm using Quorum Studio, but FYI, it has something to do with the way the graphics system is processing that request that is on there. And this is on the list of things we're going to be working with Microsoft on in our hackathon next week. Does that make sense? So, if you want to know where to install a project, you can put it wherever you want. I'm going to go to the desktop. I'm going to copy paste. Actually, I'm just going to make a new folder on my desktop. I'm going to put my app, and then I'm going to find it. I'm going to copy from Windows Explorer, and I'm going to paste it in. Okay, now, you'll notice that a lot of the major, one of the big improvements in Quorum 7 over Quorum 6 is that the user interface libraries have been improved dramatically. So in the previous versions, there weren't things like copy paste and stuff like that. We were still trying to invent this pipeline, but we finished that now. So a lot of the major features that you have on the operating systems, like copy paste and undo redo and all that kind of stuff, are all built in automatically. Find replace, all that kind of stuff. And your kids can use that when they build applications as well. So if they're building like, you know, a calculator or a game or whatever, they can integrate those same technologies. And that's all free and they can
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to make a blank Quorum application, and I'm going to press OK. Okay. And when that happens, you will notice that this thing that says blank Quorum application, because I didn't change the name, pops up, and this is just like Soggy's. Except, behind the scenes, it uses a different file format and stuff like that, but you as a user don't really have to care about it, right? Because that's just like sort of internal stuff on the system. It But I can open files, I can click on them, and I can type.
Can I ask you to back up for a minute?
Absolutely.
Sodbeans was integrated in Quorum and now Quorum Studios is integrated, so I'm just opening Quorum and behind it is either Sodbeans or Quorum Studios, the way I think of it.
Quorum is a programming, I should have said this, so I appreciate that
I
question.
know, I'm like,
I always forget,
I'm
like, it's
ground
like,
zero, yeah.
yeah, some people have come for a while and some
Yeah,
haven't, so let me back up. That's a great question. Quorum is a programming
Yeah,
language.
I got that.
And a programming language, just for anybody that isn't sure, is basically a series of commands that you feed to the computer, and then it does stuff with them. Right? So it's like, I can send a command to the system that says copy a file, and it will go do it. And I can send a command to the system that says load a 3D graphic. Or I can send a command to the system that says send a request over the internet, right? So, for example, one of the things that kids like to do with Quorum is you can send requests to robotic telescope arrays. I don't know if you've ever messed with those. Sort of like there's telescopes in Chile and other areas, and you can send them requests and ask them to take pictures for you.
Oh,
And there's all sorts of little stuff that you can do like that. Or if you play video games like World of Warcraft, you can send World of Warcraft a request and it will send you back information about your characters and stuff like that. You know, I'm not saying that's profound, but you can do that stuff out of the box with Quorum very easily. So, Sodbeans and Quorum Studio are called integrated development environments. And I know it's a buzzword, but people say IDE. All that really means is like if I'm writing a book, I might use Microsoft Word to compose it. In code, Quorum Studio and Sodbeans are like Microsoft Word, but for code. And the reason that matters is because there's all sorts of code-like things that you do that you want help with that you don't really want to manage yourself. You know, for example, if I want to run a program, that actually involves some kind of complicated steps. You have to like issue some commands and like tell it to do certain things and keep track of stuff, and turn it off and on. But an integrated development environment handles all that stuff for you, and you don't really have to think about it.
okay.
So, for example, if you wanted to run a Quorum program, or really any program in any programming language, usually you issue commands from a thing called terminal. But in Quorum, you click the play button, and that's really common in development environments. Yeah. Okay. Does that make sense?
Totally, and I really needed that.
Not a problem. Is there any other questions before I move on with that? Great. Okay. So, right now, I've got inside of my environment, I have a Quorum Studio open, and I'm inside of a text editor, and there's a blinking cursor. So what I'd like to do before we move on is I'd like to get everybody to here. And if you can't get to here in Quorum Studio, we will do it on the web so that you get some experience doing some coding, and that's okay too. It's not going to impact you very much. That's okay. If you need to do it on the web, how many people do not have it installed? Okay, so if you need to do it on the web, what I want you to do is just go to the Quorum website, quorumlanguage.com, scroll down to the bottom. I don't have internet. That's interesting. Okay, you can scroll down to the bottom if you have internet, and I will get mine set up. What is it, summer, what did you,
Summer 2018.
My organization firewall is blocking it, so I gotta call them up for the state of North Dakota and see if they can open it up. So executable is considered, it hooks into Palto networks.
Okay, great. If you are online and you don't have Quorum Studio set up, I'd like you to get your computer, open it up, and get the website up. Just go to the main homepage, scroll down to the bottom, and delete the stuff in that text.
Oh, at the bottom of the main page?
Yeah, just because it's the simplest one to get to. Okay, now I'm going to do it in Quorum Studio because I want to sort of demonstrate the pros and cons and what we're going toward, but it really doesn't matter. I also want you all to learn sort of the programming side. And if it's not bothersome, I will do it with the screen reader on just to demonstrate, but if it is, let me know and I'll turn it off. Is that reasonable? Okay, so what I'm going to do is in most programming languages, one of the first things that you learn how to do is to tell it to say something or put out output, right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to use a phrase that tells the computer to put something on the screen, to display something on the screen. And that phrase is called output. So I want you, in that box, I want you to type the word output, and then put a space. You don't technically need a space, but just by convention, you add a space. Okay? Now, inside of computer programs, programming languages are often quite dumb, right? And they require some sort of esoteric rules. And what these rules should be have been debated by computer scientists for decades. And unfortunately, when this debate has occurred, if you aren't aware, they actually haven't used evidence in the scientific literature. And now, I know that sounds weird, but I mean that very literally. A very now famous study was conducted by a fellow named Antti Juhani-Pajanaho in 2015 or something like that. And he showed that between 1950 and 2012, there was actually only 22 studies that actually used scientific evidence to discover these things. Now that might sound silly until you realize programming languages impact $400 billion of wages in the United States. So 22 studies for $400 billion of wages is not that much. On the Quorum project, we're very careful to conduct evidence-based research on how you actually do computer programming. So specifically, the word output was not chosen accidentally. It was chosen because it turns out in surveys, large-scale surveys with people, the word output seems to imply that you should put something on the screen, which is not that surprising since you're outputting something. And I bet you can guess what the surveys also indicate you should do if you're getting something in. What word would you guess? If it outputs the other, what's the other one? Right. And if you wanted to do something over and over again, what word would you guess might be related to that?
Repeat.
Repeat. It turns out that's the highest statistical thing in the study. So you can see, one thing I like about doing evidence is that when I go off and I talk to people, even if they don't know the language, because the studies show people naturally gravitate to those words, people can immediately guess them, right? Which someone did that doesn't know, right? You get the idea. Nothing's perfect, nothing's magical, but the point is we want to make it easier by using statistics and evidence to try to do that over time. So Quorum changes a little bit every year as we get it. Okay, now, to tell it to output something, you have to tell it to output text. To output text, computer programs require that you put it in quotation marks. Why? It's a convention. That one actually is a non-evidence-based convention. I don't really know anything, and different language designers disagree on it. Some use single quotes, some use double quotes, some combine them, some use other weird things. But the most common one that does the most well in the studies, as far as we can tell, is double quotes. So you put everything in double quotes. Okay, and then what you can say is whatever phrase you want. So I'm going to put, I enjoyed Ruth's talk.
Oh, duh.
It's awesome. And this program I can then run by pressing Control R.
So, you know how to install Studio.
Okay, now, you'll notice that when Quorum Studio or the web talks, if it's on the web, this connects to what's called an ARIA Live region, which all that means is that it will actually immediately output that text. That might sound like a good thing, but there are pros and cons. If you're outputting 1,000 lines of text, that's bad. If it's one line of text, that's good. So, on the web, my point is, it's really good for short snippets for education. But if you're offline, it's quite debatable that that thing should actually talk all the time, because you might be outputting a novel, right? And you don't want that to be necessarily all spoken immediately right as it goes. So if you want to get the output in Quorum Studio, you have to navigate to the pane that contains the output. I'll say that again. On the web, it's for education, for running short snippets of code, and we make it automatically say, if you're using a screen reader, what was spoken. And that makes sense because you're probably not outputting a novel online. That would be sort of weird. However, Quorum Studio must work both for child applications and professional practice. And that's important because you don't want your kids to take one class in high school and then never do anything with it ever again. You want them to gain skills so they can become professionals, right? At least have the possibility of becoming professionals. So that means that in Quorum Studio, the decision, which may be a bad one so far, we're getting feedback, is that it probably shouldn't talk everything as it goes, because it could be a whole novel that's being dumped out to the system, right? Not just a line, right? So, in order to get there, I can again press F6. Okay, so I'm in the console, now I can move up and down. And choose really screen. Everybody with me so far? Okay, now, if you haven't actually physically run this yet, please do so now. Either do it in Quorum Studio, or do it on the web, depending on what you have there.
So you build and then run.
You actually don't have to. All you have to do is either press Control-R, or you can navigate to the play button, or you can click the play button, or you can click the play menu, and all of those will work just fine. Or you can right-click on the project and click Run, so any of those options are fine.
Open up in Quorum.
So let me give you a minute. And we will come around too to make sure everybody can count. I just want to make sure we can all do this one.
So it actually probably does have the cursor thing, just for some reason graphically. Yeah, so it's blinking there. So that's.
Oh, yeah.
So what I did was I went to the desktop.
So when I went into and then after I looked in,
You're programming.
yeah, I just copied the idea from, so if you've done.
Oh, well, you have to type in the...
Where's your dog work?
So it's on the desktop. That's why I said, well, it's annoying, but you're all supposed to grab it. Okay, great. So you get it? Okay, cool. You get it? Oh, you're doing it there?
That's great, that's great.
Continually run programs? Uh-huh, yep. That's fine, totally fine on test. Oh, so you have a... I didn't look at the code.
Maybe they might, workshops that they do, but this can be done, just down and do it.
Oh, no, it's actually not very obvious what it is at all. That's, that was actually not a It's a funny kind of way.
I came in on the other side of more.
Actually, it's also
information technology.
Oh, no. That one is. Amanda, you ever seen it give a slip keyboard on a tablet?
Yes.
Is there a way to not have to do that?
No.
Oh. Interesting.
I may not send on that bug report about 6 months ago.
Oh, I since I've never heard that, but
That happens to us in Arkansas. It will not let you use the phone.
not because
On that,
I want to ignore it, but because
Stanford Tablet is closed.
you can always copy someone and put it in.
Honestly, it's like we have all week, so it's not a big deal. So it's more important you can just get a grasp of the language and some of the basics. We'll go over a lot of the basic stuff.
Good here, I mean, are you able to, oh, you don't have it for Mac? That's what you got.
Working on my big.
Okay, cool, and you, the new version is on, so you don't have to. Yeah, you can just click update. You, whether you put choose phone, it's totally your choice.
I've listened to all the episodes, so you want to read it?
Trying to overcome.
So I'm like,
You're okay, you're side to side. I know, because I'm very low right here. Yeah, it's okay.
of course it's not. That's what I'm saying. I'm reading the truth.
My favorite Facebook
Craig, whether you choose for me is up to you, but like, so welcome.
We are, we just called one.
Oh.
I did run the Planet Earth.
Oh, okay, so you got something
I got
going.
that piece done. There was a interesting problem. Yeah, all the
This is on Williams Code too. We haven't figured out what's going on.
I ran the jar and it worked fine.
Okay. Yeah, there was, we found one of the machine where that happened.
Domino's other claim that it wasn't clear how to render online video content.
Really?
That's actually, that's what they said, it's not clear how you do that. I mean, captioning, like, you're not even, you don't acknowledge that it exists. The claims are crazy, that's why I'm reading through it, it's crazy.
Good to meet you. I know that it's just a start with our tools, but I'm glad you could come and
Yeah.
Is it working with your device? We'll definitely want to work with you on that. Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, that should for sure. Yeah. Okay, all right. Here's my show of hands. Well, there's always like mnemonics. Some people prefer like red ramen, then you say that sort of thing. There's other options like hi, right? Okay. So the next thing is, can I get a show of hands for who was able to get that running a simple statement, not a simple statement, a statement? Did anyone not? So we can come around and make sure that you're good. Okay, great. So, and how many people were able to get it to go in Quorum Studio successfully? Okay, good. Is there anyone that was not able to get it to do it in Quorum Studio? That seems good. Okay, all right. So test one. Now, just for funsies, I now want you, if you have Quorum Studio open, I want you to close it and then reopen it.
Without hitting the save.
Yeah, you don't need to hit save.
Okay.
And the only reason I'm pointing this out is not because it's some kind of magical feature. I just want you to be aware that it does like store your settings and it does like keep your. Of course it did. Of course. Really? Is that really what we're going to do today? Our studio? Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, well, in theory, it should be storing all of your settings, and I had to reopen it the first time, and then it stored it after. So, Gabriel, can you put that down as a bug?
Yeah, because I had that same issue.
You had that same thing too? Okay, yeah, so apparently that's a bug. We have a bug tracker for this week, because it's a beta. That's welcome to new technologies.
Also, going through the file menu to go to open project does not seem to do anything.
Gabriel, can you connect with Adam and get that one too? Okay, but, so here's the point. Once I have that open, you will notice again that my project is up and running and should be storing some settings. Let's now do the corollary for the output statement and add an input statement. In order to do that, we're going to need to actually understand something about programming, and that is the concept of a variable. Is the concept of a variable. So for people that haven't been at Epic before, what's your guess as to what a variable is? For the people that haven't been at Epic before, I taught it for many years.
An unknown value.
An unknown value, right? Just like in math. But in computer science, variables are a little bit weird, a little bit different than math. Does anyone know what is different? Any guesses? Yeah.
They have a sign value or like?
They can, that's true. Sometimes they can. In fact, the computer by definition must assign something, right? Or not. Anything blank? What is a variable in computer science? There's a simple way to think about it that is really actually not simple at all.
Something you can change.
Something you can change, true, but like what is it? Like how is the computer doing? What is it doing when it's a variable? What does it actually do when it does this? Any guesses?
Is it a
expecting an input. But how? With what? What would it be? Well, what is a variable? Like if I have a Boolean, it's a 1 or a 0, right? Concept of Boolean, up or down, flashlight on or off, that sort of thing. How would the computer do it? How does it store a 1 or a 0? What does that mean? Well, let's think about it for a second. This is actually good. This is why we come to Epic and talk about these things. So, like, what are the parts of a computer? Anybody know? Like, you got your monitor, right? What other parts are there? I mean, name CPU. What does that do?
It processes information for the, it's basically the brain of the computer, right?
Kind of the brainish type thing. What else is there? Sheila, what do you got?
Hard drive.
Hard drive? What does it do?
It holds the programs, and you can say, well, you can save things to it.
Yeah,
Be
good.
able to access it again.
What else? What else is there?
Mouse.
The mouse,
Right.
okay. We all know what
Okay.
that one does.
Memory.
Touchpads. And the memory, interesting. So where does the variable live in those components?
Switches.
Say what?
Switches, on and off switches, or?
Well, that's true. There are switches all over the place.
So, something that
Keyboard?
activates.
Well, so there's memory, hard drive, CPU. Where would the variable live? It's an unknown value. Where would that live? Could be on the hard drive, potentially, right? Could it be on the memory? So which one is it? How do we know? Well, unfortunately, there's no way to know. You just have to know by convention. And in computer science, variables are held in memory. Why does that matter? Because they are not stored permanently. That matters a lot. And the reason it matters a lot is because when you do things in memory, it's very, very fast. When you do things on disk, less true than it used to be, but when you do things on disk, it's much, much slower, orders of magnitude slower to write something to a hard drive than it is to write something to memory. That matters a lot in computer science. You can effectively melt a system doing it on a hard drive compared to doing it on a melt again, meaning just make it small. They even have a name for it called flashing, which sounds cool or something. Okay, so in memory, if I make the concept, if I have the concept of a variable, then, and we know it goes in memory, what does it do to make a variable? What does it actually do? What do you think? Then again, let's take a Boolean. It's a single 1 or 0. Actually, it's not. But if it was a single 1 or 0, would it be in memory? So what does it do?
Run through a set of values or information based.
Well, remember, it's making a variable and it has to do something with it. Like, how do I get it? I can store it. I can get it. What does it do?
Determine the code, determine the path.
Okay, that's actually really good. Determines the path. That's really close. What it does is it figures out where it goes in memory. A variable doesn't do anything itself, right? It's not code. But what it is a place, right? A variable is effectively a place. It's a location, right? So if I make a variable and it's a Boolean, it's a single 1 or 0 or a small number of them, that is told to the computer that it has to go somewhere. But here's the catch. As humans, the computer represents that all numerically. So it might be, it's at position 1 billion. And we would never, ever, ever, ever want to actually specify those by hand. There's a couple good reasons. Can anyone think of them? Why would I not want to specify my location numerically for a variable? Can anyone think of a reason? There's a whole bunch of them.
Too complicated?
That's a really good one. Is there another one?
Oh,
Ram is volatile. That's an excellent one. Absolutely.
It's more, it's faster, it's more effective, it's more.
That's probably true too. You can organize it, right? And there's one last one that's kind of maybe not as obvious. Can anyone guess? And it's security. And that would be if the operating system is storing your passwords in memory, you don't want someone to get those. So you have to be really, really careful about what's accessible and what's not in RAM. Right? This is one reason why they often call screen readers malware, because they're actually allowed to cheat and get things they're not supposed to get. Right? And actually that can be used maliciously if you know what you're doing. Like I could use it maliciously. I just choose to only do it on your machines. That's a joke. And it's also really good why something like NVDA is good because it's open source. You can tell if it's malicious, right? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go to this output statement. We're going to go back in there, and I'm going to add some space. And I'm gonna write a variable, and the way that I do that is I first declare the type of a variable that I have, and then I give it a name, okay? Now if I'm putting, if I want to get input from the user, I'm gonna do that by having text. And so I'm gonna put that in a text variable, so I'm gonna say the word text. And then I'm gonna give it a name, of whatever I want. You can name yours whatever you feel like. And so I'm gonna name mine stuff. Okay?
No quotation.
No quotation mark. Because it's the name of the variable, and variable names do not have quotation marks around them. Okay, so now I've identified a couple things. I have the word output, put something out to the screen. I have text, which is like raw text, which has quotation marks in it. I mean, around it. And then I have the name text, which is a type, and I have a name, which is stuff. Okay, already we've got 4 computer science concepts, so I'm sure you're already like, stop. But I promise you, it's not so bad when you get used to it. You get used to it. It's important. Now, on my screen as well, you will notice that there's a red underline. And unfortunately, this is actually, the red underlines are not accessible yet. It's one thing we're working with on Microsoft next week. It's literally, it's already on our list of what their engineers are going to use to handle. And that red underline, oh, by the way, I should say, in previous versions of Soybeans, if you had a red underline, it would ding when you have an error. We've figured out a better way to do it, which is why we're waiting until next week to do it. That will be native screen reader sort of dings. So it should work a little bit actually better than Soybeans ever has.
It wasn't a dig. It really was very sick, wet fart noise.
I don't recall actually doing any recordings on that, but
The students loved it.
okay. Good to know.
Wonder why.
So what I'm going to do with my text stuff is I'm going to ask the user for information. So I'm going to say space equals space. The spaces aren't technically required. We're just kind of adding it by convention. And I'm going to do the corollary of stuff, of output, which is input. And then I'm going to get information from the user. Oh, by the way, I didn't finish my sentence. Those red underlines mean that there's an error. However, they don't mean you should be scared, right? And the reason is because just because there's an error on my screen with a red line doesn't mean there's a problem. I'm still typing, right? I haven't finished my thought. But when you see red lines and you think it's done, it indicates that there is a problem on the system. And those sound scary until they realize they help you. Because if you were to run that program and it wasn't giving you errors, it would almost certainly cause problems in memory or other areas. So those errors prevent you from making mistakes as your program runs, right? So they do take getting used to, but they're important, right? It's something you have to know, or that your students should know. As a computer scientist, I guarantee you over their career, they will have errors, right? Okay, so now I'm going to type the word input. I'm going to put parentheses and double quotes. Okay? So I'm going to put text stuff equals input, then parentheses, and then double quotes. And inside of those double quotes, I'm going to say, tell me your favorite number. I'm not saying anything important in the message, I'm just kind of stating a thing. Okay. And now I'm going to, just because, I want to use my variable. So instead of having output and then a phrase, I'm going to say output stuff. Okay. Okay, is everybody with me? Raise your hand if you've gotten this far. Okay, now I'm going to show you a couple of things here so you're not scared of it when it inevitably happens. Right? First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to press delete on one of the characters and stuff. I'm intentionally spelling it wrong. Right? I'm doing that on purpose. When I spell it wrong, the computer knows it because it knows I've made a variable called stuff, and it knows that I'm telling it to output stuf, which isn't a variable, right? So then what I'm going to do, just because I've been using the hotkeys, I'm going to show you visually that I can also click the buttons. And I can ask the computer to check why this is happening. And so I'm going to click this build wrench thing. And I'm going to mute the screen reader for a bit. In fact, I'll probably turn it off in a minute. And what it says is, I could not locate the variable named stuf, line 5, and then file whatever. Okay, so everybody please cause a problem on purpose. Click the little wrench or go to it accessibly, F6 to the toolbar, press tab, stuff like that. And then make sure that you can get an error to happen on purpose, so you see what it does. Yes?
So some of you are online, and if you make the error, it's really ugly.
Yes.
That's why we like Quorum Studio better.
Yes.
Because the error doesn't tell you anything that you did wrong at all. You get to hunt and peck through until you figure it out.
Well, the build should tell you.
It's really bad.
The build showed me exactly where I said I can help you.
Oh, yeah, you should have the error.
So if I copy paste that to the Quorum stuff, when I press build, that's what it says. It actually says the same error. Oh, it's the freaking thingies. Yeah, that's what we just found over here too. I didn't.
Okay, yeah, because when you went to write it didn't work right.
Yeah, iOS tablets can't use quotation marks.
That's so weird.
I must not have hit send on that one.
I guess not. Well, we'll put it in the new web tracker.
Yeah.
Okay, so has everyone caused a problem? I'm sure you should.
Yes!
Specifically one related to programming. Okay, now I'm going to add this back, an extra F, and I'm going to show you how to accessibly run input in Quorum Studio. Now, I'm mentioning this one specifically because if you use Soundbeans, it's actually different than it is in Quorum Studio. And there's a reason for that, and that's because the way that you did it in Soundbeans was actually really confusing, and we couldn't change it because Oracle wouldn't let us, right? So we were kind of stuck. But in Quorum Studio, we do whatever we want, so we did. Screw you, Oracle. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to press play, press Control R. And so it's put me in the console. And it says, tell me your favorite number. And that's because I put that, tell me your favorite number, in the input block of that thing. So it outputs that to a user. And then when I go to this little input box on the bottom, which I can get to by tabbing, I can then write whatever I want. So I'm going to say 5. I'm going to go to the send button, which I did through tab, or I can just click on this too. That's fine. Press space, and then you'll notice that it said 5 in the text box above. So I want to kind of point out visually, for those of you who can see it, I'll describe what exactly is going on here. Okay? Text stuff tells the computer, I want to store something in memory. It tells it that its type is text, and that tells it how to store it in memory. That matters. Input says, get information from a user, and before you do that, tell the user something, like get me my favorite number, or whatever you wanted to say. After that happens, it puts whatever you typed into stuff, which doesn't have to be a number, but that's okay. And then it outputs that to the screen. Are y'all with me? Okay. Can we get everybody to do that? So that you can do it, type it, click it, and go. So I'm making a variable, putting something in it, telling it to go.
Oh, you did, okay, send.
So just double check.
Yes, sir.
When I type in like whatever.
By the way, welcome.
So I type like say 21 in there and then send and it'll put in 21 up here.
Yep.
Does that have any meaning with this code at this point anymore?
It does not. All it knows is that it's in that spot, but that's all that the computer cares about.
Okay.
So
It's in the input spot now?
there's the character 2 and the character 1 is in the variable stuff being stored. But other than that, it has no intrinsic meaning.
Okay, cool. Yeah, yes.
You have to.
Okay, by show of hands, how many people have gotten that to input something and output something to the screen? Okay, right on. And Joel, right?
Yeah.
Were you able to do it with the screen reader?
Yes, but in the browser.
Oh, in the browser. Do it in the browser. Okay, great. Oh, right, because we haven't installed Chrome Studio for you. Is that right? Okay. Okay, questions about anything, about the environments, about what's happening in this code, about life, love, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Yes. Wait, Dave?
No,
Evan. Oh, Evan McDonald.
Yes.
In Colorado.
Yes.
I'm just trying to make sure I remember everybody, especially new faces.
So for on soybeans, can I get that 5 down below, or is that only marks?
Now you can, it will do it, but it works differently. So are you in Soybeans?
Yes,
If you're in Soybeans, the text box is actually where the input goes. Why? I don't know. That's they made us do it that way. Yes, you press 5, and then you press enter, and then it repeats it to you.
Oh, okay.
Now, does that make any sense? No, it doesn't. But that's the way we had to do it. They have this wrapper architecture for the console stuff, and you couldn't modify it. So, yes, Oracle basically.
So basically,
Pretty much up to speed.
Well, I kind of wanted to see like, as like a new school that comes to
Yep.
That's right.
okay.
Do you wanna do it, you wanna do it with this one? So that's not, I don't have any.
Okay, other questions? I think Adam, you had one.
No, I don't have a question.
Okay, good. So we have about 15 minutes to lunch. So do you want to do a couple more?
We would just to give you some options. Where the best, what's gonna work best for,
Okay.
you know, you can be.
I just want to make sure that you're good for the next section. Okay, I'll give you a few more minutes. Yeah, no problem. I'll make it fine. Now, I know that won't work with Chrome Studio. Like I said, you take that $500,000. And I'll work on it, getting grants for it, so, you know.
And I have the old message, but I should.
No, you can do that too. No, it's fine. You have to go to the checkout, and then it'll automatically update for you. And the new version has one of the It's also one a lot faster. Yeah, a lot of those.
Joel, sorry, Joel. Sorry.
Everyone does it. Yeah. Well, the thing is too, so is like a lot of the stuff. Do you understand that for their library is mature? It's just
Yes, I mean,
No,
so when I did,
Yeah.
stuff allocated at runtime, it's still getting the input and it's just allocated?
But, you know, it's really working.
There's a variable when the program starts running.
What month is that?
Dynamically kind of allocating all those? No. Because of the fact that so Quorum is a compiled language. Okay, that was what I was wondering.
Yeah. No. The evidence shows that
Oh,
static
yeah,
type
it should be
languages
fine.
are
I
better
don't think
than
you
that.
take it. And I think you use it
just for different,
Sure.
for clarity.
I think it's a little finicky.
Yeah, and for,
But I think you
for
can-
productivity and for
Even though we have our input happening
So-
at runtime.
Yeah.
It's actually.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
the
why don't we,
yeah,
show of
space is
hands, how
all
many
right.
people have gotten input and output? Okay, great. Okay, so then let's go on to the next piece of these variables. So the next session is all about variables, and we'll kind of give you an intro to that now. So in many programming languages, there are all sorts of things that we call types. And types are super important, and they basically tell the computer how to process memory, right? So we use text. And when you process text, there's all sorts of funky rules about it, right? And you can imagine why. Like, you have humans of different real languages, like English or French or stuff like that. You might have Chinese characters or other types of things that are going on. But in addition to that, there are other kinds of variables that might need to be processed in a different way for different reasons. So for example, if I have numbers can't be in math, they can be of infinite size, but in the computer that won't work because we don't have infinite memory, right? In addition, should a number have a decimal point or not? Well, as it turns out, if they have decimal points, it actually makes it a little tricky in the computer. There's all sorts of rules about what you do with decimal points and how you add numbers with them and stuff like that. Besides that, sometimes we might want things that are very simple. Like a Boolean is really useful as a switch, right? I wouldn't want to use a number with like a decimal point for that because a Boolean will take less memory and have other advantages. So oftentimes we usually talk, when we first introduce to kids, we first talk about four main types. One is text, one is Boolean, one is integer, which is a number without a decimal point in this context, and number, which means any old number. Okay, so I'm saying those again. There's text, it's like a bunch of values in double quotes. There is Booleans, an on-off switch, like a light switch. There's an integer, kind of like rolling a die, a whole number of values. And then there's number, which means a value in the decimal place. Right? You with me? So we make them in exactly the same way, except we put those names in front. Text, Boolean, integer, or number. So the next thing I want you to do is I want you to make a variable right below where we have text. Don't use input, just say number, text, whatever, and make one of each type. And then output it to the screen.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the difference between a Boolean and an integer? I mean, I assume an integer is a whole number.
Correct.
A number can have a decimal place, and what's a Boolean is 0 or 1?
A Boolean is a 0 or 1.
Okay.
Now, I want to be clear that these things internally in the computer are stored in weird ways that we won't really get into
That's okay,
much.
I just have to,
Yeah, but, so in other words, like if you say it's a 0 and 1 as a Boolean, that is true from a logic way,
that's fine.
but actually it's doing some weird stuff internally, so, on purpose, right? It's not accidental. Oh, and I should say, with whole numbers, it's not an infinitely sized number. They're limited to a certain number of bits, right? So it's something like 2 to the 32, something like that. So it's different. And if you need more, you can get more, but that's it. That's a little. Okay, so I have text stuff, so if I'm going to make a Boolean, I can type Boolean. Like any variable, I give it a name. So, bool. Just like with any other variable, I then say equals. And a Boolean isn't a string, isn't text, right? So it can really only have two values, which would be 0 or 1. But 0 or 1 is weird because which one's true, which one's false? Is the 0 the false or the true the false? So what we say is either true or false. So I would say true. And for the sake of argument, I'm going to remove the input statement so I don't have to keep retyping it in this one up here. So I'm going to add output statements. You can keep it your way if you prefer. And then I'm going to say output bool. And I'm going to run my program. And I'm going to describe it. So I have text stuff equals double quote, tell me your favorite number, double quote. Boolean bool equals true. And then output stuff, output bool. Okay, so again what this is doing is I have a variable, it's storing it in memory. I have double quotes around a phrase, which can be whatever I want. I have Boolean, which stores something in memory. It actually takes less space in memory. It has a name named bool. And we're setting it equal to true. So if this was a 0 and 1, this would be a 1. Eternal. And then we're outputting both of these variables. Questions? Okay. So let's try the integer.
I guess my question is, what's the difference between the text and the Boolean?
The text.
I mean, I understand one's letters and one's 0 or 1.
No, I can answer that. It's no problem. With the Boolean, since it's a 0 or 1, it has a single location in memory, like one spot. Like let's suppose you had 10 memory spots. That would take up one of them.
Okay.
But if stuff, each character is a spot. So T is a spot, E is a spot, L is a spot, L is a spot, and they have to go in sequence. So they have to process it all differently.
Okay.
Does
But
that
they
make
both
sense?
in the end do the same thing and it's back out of you.
That's right. But they're used for different things. There's all sorts of stuff.
I'll wait and see.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But for sure, like they use for different things, but they're both stored in memory. They do effectively the same thing. Okay. Next, I have integer, which I type that phrase. I'm going to say int. Again, you'll see, if you can see my screen, there is a red line that you can ignore. I'm still typing. It doesn't mean there's a problem. It just means that I'm still in the middle of writing. And then an integer has to be a number. So what would happen if I put double quote, 0 double quote? Well, that's actually not a number. That's a string. That's a text value. So instead what we do is we put a real number. So like 45. Actually 42 is the mean. It is. And I can output int. Okay, so now I have 3 lines. I've made a text variable and set it to something. I've made a Boolean variable, named it bool, and set it to something. An integer variable, done the same, and then output all 3. And there's one more. Number. And the only difference between integer and number from a semantics perspective is that I can say number num equals 42.0. Now you can't have infinite decimals, just like you can't have an infinitely sized integer. There are limits to how big the number can be, how small the number can be, how much precision there is. There's a million things to think about. But in practice, you can give it a decimal point, and that's very precise. You can definitely make a rocket and fly it to the moon with that level of precision. But for certain kinds of applications, you might have to do more. So I can say output now. Okay. And if I run my program, it does indeed do all these things and output it to the screen. Voila. So okay, so this stuff, to some, yeah, you have a question?
No.
Oh, okay. To some of you, this particular part might be boring, I don't know, I'm not really sure. But it's fundamental to computer science. It's the kind of thing that you need to do anything else, right? So like, for example, if you want your kids to be able to do 3D graphics, guess what they do? Instead of a integer variable, they make a model variable, right? And that model variable loads all sorts of numbers. It does it for you. If you want to load a button, you make a button variable. All that kind of stuff. So it's fundamental to how you do anything on the system. Okay, so I think it's lunchtime. So I think that we can bail for now, and then we'll be back in a bit. We'll start talking more about this stuff. Sound good?